If you haven't seen the thumbnail, you're in for a surprise. Because this cheap-looking stereo set from 1993 was at least 20 years ahead of its time. It was made by Schneider, a German brand known for its cheap hi-fi. Except this one maybe. It's different. The front has only 4 buttons. But this is the remote. You can hardly do anything with that. Looks like this thing is hiding something. What else can we find? Fake heat sinks that only make sense if you place them side by side. The real heat sink is here. Side by side, you can appreciate how symmetrical the components are. That is, until you open the display. This is the first hi-fi with a graphical user interface. The Schneider Boston. 4 years earlier than the dual system I showed before. It's a pity that the design is not as progressive. It hardly looks better than my childhood Cosmel mini system. Maybe a harsh opinion, but I really tried, and I cannot make it look nice. It's a remarkable design choice to hide the one thing that makes it stand out. And it's not motorized like this later Pioneer system. A product you've never seen from a hi-fi brand you might have never heard of. Schneider goes all the way back to 1889 and began with making woodworking machines. They slowly shifted towards audio and only in 1971 reorganized to focus solely on hi-fi. Only in the early 90s they too began struggling with the competition from the Far East and began distinguishing themselves by making a series of floor-standing hi-fi towers, which they named the American line. This one's also nice. But anyway, this, the Boston, was their flagship product. After 2 years of searching, I found one with a working display in Austria. And after an incredible adventure of 24 days, the display failed.
Cobweb inside.
The problem with this system is that most of them will be thrown away. It's only special to a nerd like me. Nobody wants it, and almost nobody tries to sell it. Finding another one anytime soon was quite unlikely. The display did light up, but didn't show anything. I took a look inside. It looked impressive, but there was of course nothing I could do.
Now what?
The inside is very complex. I think I can even see a ROM here, with version 8.5. Wow! These symbols indicate it's not all made in Germany. But nowhere does it say made in. Searching for Schneider Boston gave 0 useful results. So I searched for the display part number instead. And found myself a Google whack. A search with only 1 result. In 2023. And it was a useful result. In 2023, I'm sorry. Apparently the flaws on the display were common. I deemed this one unusable. But half a year later I found a second one, complete with working display. I've decided not to collect more gear than fits in here. I failed. Anyway, after a successful test in Germany, this one now also failed. Or so I thought. The two components are connected with this system supply. But there's also a normal pre-out audio cable. And after connecting that, the display worked. Apparently there's also a display signal going through that cable. Could this be possible because it's at an inaudible frequency? So it turns out the first unit had a working display. But this one is flawless, which unfortunately cannot be said for the mechanics. Both cassette decks were playing without a cassette, but the device thought nothing was happening. And things weren't much different for the other one. Oh, I forgot the brute force technique. The system can freeze when something isn't working.
Come on.
But they did name it a computer screen, so the behavior is accurate. Everything seems to be made on a budget, except that display. But let's first look at the other display. It's a power meter that only shows when you crank up the volume. An inverted backlit LCD with a completely different color. On the second unit, this wasn't working, and I had a suspicion why. The light bulbs were burnt out. So by throwing in an RGB light, I could get a matching color. Nice, right? Well, I think I finally managed to make this thing look nice. Right? Perhaps these lights are also bulbs. I do not have the speaker stands that double-functioned as CD cabinets. But I do have this stand, which is a subwoofer, that you should not power with the second speaker output, but instead loop through using these unlabeled connectors. The instructions are of great help here. Speaking of instructions, this perfectly preserved manual is probably a very rare print by now. But back to the subwoofer. Inside we find a single speaker with twin bass ports. And we see some of the filtering coils that separate the low and high frequencies. It's the same as a three-way speaker, but in separate housings. And now, the sound test. This was recorded with perfectly neutral microphones. But the sound is quite sharp and crisp. I didn't expect it to sound this good. But that might be because I mix my music so well. Only the mid-low is quite prominent, which cannot be corrected because there's no equalizer, only bass and treble control. And that finally brings us to the multi-visual control. Thanks to that forum, we know that the display resolution is 640 by 200 and it can show grayscales. But on the Boston, a pixel can only be on or off. Just like that dual system, the power button cuts the power, and you can only put it in standby with the remote. But you can wake it up with one of the function buttons. Selections are shown with inverted text. On the sound screen, I like the amplifier input level. Quite useful, and I haven't seen that on a HiFi system before. This is also the only screen where you can see what the volume is. Next, the CD player. Which of course wasn't working. And when I attempted to get that error message again, it accidentally worked for the first time. So, this is the memory entry. And this is direct track entry. And this function lets you repeat a part of a track onto the double cassette deck. Completely unresponsive, but the other one worked very briefly when I first tried it. That red cassette has been stuck in there ever since. And then the tuner. No moving parts, so it works perfectly fine. And it's quite impressive. If you ignore that there is no clock, so no timer functions whatsoever. But it does have radio text in 1993. Alternatively, you can enter your own text. Whoopsie daisies. Whoopsie daisies. Whoopsie daisies. Here's some earlier footage of the fully automatic search and save function. This really looks like a computer screen. And then, just by clicking sort, the results with radio text, only 3 apparently, are placed at the top of the list. And you can even undo all that. And the last remaining screen is record. It shows the recording controls of the cassette on the left side of the screen. Well, and that is the first HiFi system with a graphical user interface. Or is it? The music in this video is available on the EP Schneider Boston, on Bandcamp and later also streaming. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon. That wasn't meant sarcastically, by the way. Well, at least there is my lazy channel. Actually, I'm surprised I still have supporters on Patreon.
Het bleef niet vastzitten. Dom.